Today, we will talk about conditional probability. Now, here in the main idea, this is the academic definition of what conditional probability is, which is conditional probability is the probability of an event, let's call that event A, given that another event B has already occurred. Now, what this means is that what is the probability for an event to happen when something else has already happened before? So there has to be two events. And in order for the second event to happen, the first event should happen already. So you can think about conditional probability as what is the probability for something to happen when a previous event has already happened. So now let's get started. Now, before we start actually computing conditional probabilities, let's just look at some examples of what conditional probability is. So here we have three examples. Now, this first example is look at the question and it says, what is the probability for you to wear rain boots given that it is a rainy day? So let's think about it for a second. Will you be wearing rainy boots whenever it's sunny outside? Most likely not, if it isn't for just some kind of a fashion statement. But usually you wear rainy boots whenever it's raining outside. So notice like here, first it needed to be raining, and once that it rained, then you will probably wear your rainy boots. Oops. So this is an example of what a conditional probability is, because first it needed to be raining, and now that it rained, then we can talk about the probability of you to be wearing rainy boots. Because notice that you will most likely will not wear any rainy boots if it's not raining outside. So notice that this is a conditional probability because it first had to be raining in order for you to be wearing rainy boots or rain boots. Now, let's look at the second examples here. Well, say that you enjoy video games. Now, what is the probability for you to play the new Super Mario in the new Nintendo console? So now, how can this be an example of a conditional probability? Well, first, if you want to be playing a video game, you first need to have a console. So first, you need to have a console, which is the actual machine that plays the game. And now that you have the console, then you can play, which in this case is Super Mario. So notice that here, this is a conditional probability because first you needed to have the console. And now that you have the console, then you can actually play the video game. Because let's say you just have the game, you just have the CD on your hand. How are you going to play it? Well, first you need to have the console. You need to have what you're going to be playing it on. So this is an example of conditional probability because first you need to have the console and then you can play the video game. So notice that it's one event after the other. And lastly, if we look at example 3, how can example 3 be an example of a conditional probability? Well, let's read it. It says, what is the probability to pass your math exam given that you have studied all semester? Well, usually if you want to pass mathematics, you need to study for several hours. So if you want to pass mathematics, most likely, if you study, most likely you will pass. So this is a conditional probability because if you don't study, most likely you will not have a passing grade. So first you need to study and then we can talk about the probability of passing. So these are some examples of conditional probabilities, because remember that conditional probability is the probability of an event to happen knowing that another event has already happened previously. So these were just examples. We're not looking for the actual probability because here, this is how you find the probability when we talk about condition probability. This is just a formula that we need to get familiar with. Conditional probability. With conditional probability, we're going to use the simple P parenthesis A given B. How do you find the conditional probability? Well, you need to know two things. You need to know the probability of A and B, and you need to know the probability of just B. Now, remember that here, P stands for probability. So if you want to find out the conditional probability, PA given B, where B is the event that's the first event in the sequence, which in this case B will be study or the console. So PA given B, that is equal to PA and B, which A and B is kind of like the intersection. Oops. So if you find the intersection and just the probability, and you divide it by the probability of B, then you can find out the conditional probability. So notice that if we talk about conditional probability, all you need to know is just two things. What is the probability of the intersection, P and A and B, and you're going to divide it by the probability of B. Once we know those two things, we divide it, and then we get the probability for a conditional probability. So let's see some examples where that is implemented. So here we're going to have our formula just for reference. Now let's look at the scenarios and let's see if we can figure out what is what. So the first thing I should always do is just understand the scenario. So now here we have that Andrea is a very good student, and that's great. Now the probability that she studies and, so here's a keyword, and passes her mathematics exam is 0.85. So now, if we keep reading here, it says, if the probability that Andrea studies is 0.93, so the probability for her to study is 0.93, then, well, might as well do this as well. Then we want to find out the probability that Andrea passes her mathematics exam, given that she has studied. So again, this is an example, a conditional probability, because first she needed to study in order to know if she's going to pass or not. So if we want to use conditional probability, again, all we need to know is just two things. What is P, A and B, and what is P of B? Now, notice that here we are given two values, but notice that the first sentence or the second sentence, it says the probability that she studies and passes her mathematics exam. Because they use the word and, then we know that this section is P, A, and B. So we know that P, A, and B, that's equal to 0.85. Now, let's just rewrite the 5. So now let's see. If we're able to figure out what PB is, then we're good. Just plug it to the formula and we're done. Now, what is B? Here B is the probability for her to study. So if we read our sentence here, because first you need to study and then we can talk about if she's going to pass the test or not. So the first event that happened is studying. So that's why B is studying here. And we know the probability for her to study, it's been given here, 0.93. So 0.93. We know those two values. We have a formula. Let's figure it out. So the conditional probability, P, A, and B, or the condition, or the probability for Andrea to pass her mathematics exam is equal to P, A, and B, which we found it to be 0.85. That's an ugly 5. That's better. Divided by P of B, but we know that P of B is 0.93. So if we do this correctly, we're going to have 0.91. So notice that she has a pretty high probability for her to be passing her mathematics test. So notice that studying does pay off. Now, if we look here at example 2, again, the first thing they want to do is just understand the scenario and highlight key important things that you think might be useful. So now let's see. We know the probability that Sui will go to Mexico in the winter and to France in the summer is zero point 0.4 or 0.40. So if she wants to visit Mexico and France in the summer, we know that that probability is zero point 0.4. Now, the probability that she will go to Mexico in the winter is 0.60. Okay, so now let's see, what exactly are we looking for? We want to find the probability that she will go to France this summer, given that she just returned from her winter vacation in Mexico. So notice that what she's saying here is that first, she wants to go to Mexico and then go to France. So notice that this is an example of a conditional probability because first she needed to go to Mexico and then go to France, according to the scenario that we're given. So again, if we want to find out conditional probability, we need to know two things. We need to know P, A, and B, and we need to know P of B. Let's see, can we get that or this piece of information from the reading? Well, here, if we see what we highlighted in red, it says Mexico and here's the keyword, and Mexico winter and France in the summer. That's 0.40. So this is our P, A, and B. Now, first, we need to go to Mexico. So that is our P of B. Do we know the probability for her to go to Mexico? Well, it says here, the probability that she will go to Mexico in the winter is 0.60. Excellent. We know those two pieces of information. Then we can find out P, A given B, which is a conditional probability. And that is equal to P, A, and B, which we found it to be 0.40, divided by P of B, which we found it to be 0.60. And this is equal to 0.66. So again, conditional probability is when you want to find out the probability of an event when something else must have happened before. So now, here's your entrance ticket. Understand the following scenario and find the given conditional probability. And again, here is just the formula that you might use for this problem.